That's right, you're getting a twofer. So, yep, we're finally closing out Defenders, and then we'll tackle the next two episodes of Punisher. Well, actually, we'll close out Defenders, I'll sum up my thoughts on Defenders, and then we'll tackle the next two episodes of Punisher. Okay, so episode 7 of the Defenders is Fish in the Jailhouse. We have a weird kind of opening bit. It's in the past, and Elektra and Stick are talking about trying to draft Daredevil into the chase. And and obviously this is happening at some point in season 2 of Daredevil, but I can't figure out when. I don't know if this is shortly after the first meeting or what, but it does kind of pay off because it does hint that Stick does sort of point out that Elektra still has feelings for Daredevil, even though she says she doesn't. Jumping into the present, Jessica comes to in the police precinct. Misty is interrogating her. Misty gets nowhere with them. As this is happening, Matt comes to, also in the police precinct, and Foggy is there to tell him what happened. Matt says they need to find Danny Rand. Claire and Colleen both look after an unconscious Luke, who wakes up and again finds out what happened. We then go back to the hand, and the other finger is basically try to assert power over Elektra, saying, yeah, you may have killed her, but that doesn't mean you stand anywhere different. And she says, look, I can kill all of you and you can be dead. You'll be dead. So I am only interested in getting the substance to extend and to resurrect life. That's all. I'm tired. I was like, I'm not here to be your leader or your puppet master or whatever. What you guys do in your spare time, I don't care about. Anyway, she takes Danny down into a sub-basement, and she takes him to something that basically kind of freeze. As this is happening, Matt talks to Luke and Jessica about what the Hand's plans are for Danny. They go over the blueprints to the headquarters of the Hand, and they discover, like I said, there's this tunnel that goes down, and then it just sort of stops at this one point. There's like a barrier of some kind that Danny, which it turns out is a wall that had been sealed by a previous Iron Fist to Danny Rand, and only an Iron Fist can take it down. And that's basically what they need for. So Matt suits up as Daredevil, Luke and Jessica, they all make their way to the Hand headquarters. Colleen kind of tails behind them. At this point, too, Misty and Claire also show up. And they are trying to make their way into the building long enough. Misty's there basically to hold off the NYPD, to stall them as long as they can. Danny basically isn't going to comply with just taking down the barrier. So he and Elektra begin fighting. As it happens, Danny very, very stupidly charges up his key, charges up the Iron Fist, swings. Elektra manages to dodge his punch, grab his hand, and throw it into the barrier, which causes it to fall down. And Danny wakes up, and basically the barrier was protecting the resting place of Shao Lao. I don't know exactly how it is. It's a giant dead dragon, and they're walking through there, and this is apparently where they get the substance to extend life. I'm guessing it's by grinding up the dragon bones, because they don't really explain it very well. As this happens because now we're moving into episode 8, which is just called The Defenders, and it's revealed that Colleen swiped all the C4 that Jessica's architect was hiding and was planning to use to bring down the Hand headquarters and seal everything back up again. Luke and Jessica oppose the idea of trying to use it, but eventually everyone kind of comes to the conclusion that they have to use it, but they'd rather use it without hurting any innocent people. The Hand is harvesting some of the bones of Shao Lao to make the resurrection substance. Like I said, I'm not entirely sure whether or not it's the bones, but Gal also points out that once they're done, basically New York City will collapse under its own weight. Because this has been the earthquakes that have been going on and everything. Daredevil, Luke, and Jessica eventually find the elevator into the sub-basement. Colleen and Claire are laying down the C4 in the boiler room of the building, and it's then that Bakuto comes out and starts fighting with Colleen. Danny gets taken hostage again as Daredevil, Luke, and Jessica arrive in the sub-basement. At this point, it just turns out into a big fight. Misty, as the police enter, they find out that, at this point it's realized that the C4 is missing, and they're trying to secure the premises. Sorry. Secure the premises. Misty kind of makes her way inside. She also confronts Bakudo. Bakudo gets into a fight with her, chops off Misty's right arm, which is what happens in the comics, and eventually Colleen manages to decapitate Bakudo, and unfortunately in the process the C4 timer got activated. And Daredevil sends, as this is happening, Daredevil is able to hear that the timer has been activated. He says, okay, we need to get out of here. And he basically tells Danny, Luke, and Jessica, get on the elevator. I need to try to hold Elektra off. You need to get out of here. I'll try to follow you. As this is happening, again, Matt tries to reason with Elektra, but she's not having any of it. She's basically gone completely evil at this point. And Luke, Danny, and Jessica meet up with Misty and Claire and Colleen, and they manage to just get out of the building as the explosives go off and the whole thing collapses down. And basically the hand is done for. Everyone returns to the precinct, and you see Jessica being reunited with Trish and her neighbor, and Luke is basically there with everyone else. Luke and Danny show up too, and Foggy and Karen are just sitting there waiting, and that's how basically the news gets broken to them that in all likelihood Matt is gone. You go back a few days later, and for the most part it seems like everything is stabilized, that the hand really is no more, although we don't see what happened to Gao. She apparently slipped away, and Lord Kami is dead. He got impaled on some rebar. Bakudo is dead. So, again, we don't exactly know what, because Gao's about the only one who slipped out, but I'm willing to bet that she's probably alive. She either A, went back all the way and somehow managed to find herself back in Kunlun, or she somehow got out of the building. Foggy visits Karen in church as she's praying for Matt, believing that he is still somehow alive, and it turns out he is. He's in a Catholic mission being taken care of, and as he starts to come to, a sister named Maggie is called for, which, if you recall my Daredevil Born Again review, that obviously leads to some things. Now, I don't know if that means they're going to do Born Again for Season 3 of Daredevil. It's going to be kind of hard, because the whole point of that is the Kingpin is taking down Matt. But, yeah. That's basically how the whole thing ends. So, before we move on to Punisher, I might as well, because this is the end of the Defenders, and we're still going to be continuing on with Punisher and then moving on to Jessica Jones. My thoughts on Defenders are, well, there were some good parts. The action, for the most part, is good. A lot of the character interaction is good. Unfortunately, it's really dull. It's like the main complaint is it is boring. The Hand are boring. They're duller than dishwater, and again, trying to expand it just made it worse. And again, I remember hearing somewhere that a lot of this was built because they thought Iron Fist was going to be the show that really, really took off, and so people were really going to be interested in more Danny Rand, and people are not interested in Danny Rand, and no one cares. Again, I would have liked more Luke and Jessica. They were interesting. Matt was, he's just kind of there. I mean, Stick does most of the stuff in this. So yeah, a lot of it just came across hollow, and a lot of times there's way too much talk and not enough action. Like I said, the character interaction parts are good, but sometimes they're just misplaced. Like there's this one scene at the precinct where Karen and Trish actually talk, and they kind of share some stories. It's like, that would have been really interesting, except it doesn't happen until episode 8. That should have happened in episode 5. That would have been a more interesting time. Not during the climactic battle. Focus on the dang battle. So yeah, some real problems with this. I guess overall I'm giving Defenders a C. Uh, if they do another one, hopefully it'll be better. I guess.
Cobra's stolen the defense plans and is heading for the stiletto! Stop up before he launches into space! We'll take the Desert Fox! We're too late! Look, it's Sergeant Slaughter riding the Warthog! Nobody beats G.I. Joe, fighting hard against Cobra Foe! Nobody beats G.I. Joe, a real American hero! The trust of mine! What happens next? Find out in Marvel Comics.
Cheese it. Get your own box. And catch Spider-Man 2 in theaters June 30th.
Okay, who are you?
The milkman?
Do you have a sidekick?
No.
A nemesis?
A what?
A bad guy?
I'm a people person.
Have you been fighting crime long?
I don't fight crime.
What do you fight?
Osteoporosis. A never-ending supply of milk. And chocolate milk.
Want strong bones? Calcium may help prevent osteoporosis.
Okay, moving on to episode 7 of The Punisher, we have Crosshairs. It begins with Frank and Micro beginning to go after a colonel that was also involved. He was a morgue attendant that was involved in the heroin trafficking. As this is happening, Russo visits Madani and tries to throw her off her scent by saying all of his sources say Frank Castle is dead. Russo then visits Rollins, who then takes Russo to task for not killing Castle when he had the chance. And you basically kind of get that as this is happening, like how much they know. And eventually, Madani begins to suspect that her office is bugged, and those suspicions are all but confirmed. Frank and Micro go after Colonel Bennett as he's being visited by a dominatrix. Bennett is the heroin trafficker, the morgue attendant. And it turns out this is also a trap set by Russo and Rollins to try to capture Castle, but Frank manages to escape, and he unfortunately winds up wounding a guy who's just trying to do his job along the way, and he's a little upset about it. Like I said, Madani and her partner, sort of on this, Agent Stein, discover the bug in her office at this point. Frank and Micro, basically what they did was when they broke into Bennett's house, they bugged his phone so they can track it. They stingrayed it, actually. They stingrayed his phone. They track it to a CIA safe house. As this is happening, Russo is basically Bennett was retired, or he was promised a new identity and a new life, some new money and everything, but in reality Russo just kills him. They track it down to the CIA safe house where Rollins is hiding out. Frank sees Rollins and recognizes him. He takes a shot with his sniper rifle. Unfortunately, the glass is all bulletproof, and that just alerts Rollins to Castle's presence. And that's basically how the episode ends. Moving on, we have Cold Steel. Micro turns up info on Rollins, and Frank points out that it's the deputy director of the CIA, and they're like, oh crap, if he realizes we're hacked, he could be tracking us right now, we could be done for. And Frank sort of points out that none of what ever has been happening has been turning up on the CIA website as a possible reports or anything, so all of this is off the book, so they should be safe. It's then that Micro notices that the security cameras that he'd set up in his house to track down his family are off, and this is kind of a subplot that has been going through this. I guess I didn't touch on in the last bit when I reviewed episodes 5 and 6. Sarah Lieberman is having problems with her son Zach. He's starting to act up. He's kind of being a bully. He stole a skateboard. Excuse me. Like I said, he stole a skateboard. So Frank goes to the Lieberman house again. Turns out that Sarah, to discipline Zach, disconnected the Wi-Fi, and then she eventually threw him out of the house to go play with his friends because even she was getting annoyed by it. The two kind of split a couple bottles of wine, and she kind of drunkenly kisses Frank just as Frank had turned the Wi-Fi back on, so the cameras were all activated. As this is happening, Madani and Stein begin to set up a new trap for Castle, but really it's a ruse to try to flush out the people who bugged Madani's office. Frank goes back to the headquarters of Micro. He does apologize to her and to him for kissing his wife, but Micro's actually kind of okay with it. He's like, look, at some point she was probably going to kiss some guy, at least it's you. Exactly. Like I know it's probably not going to take advantage of her. And like the two kind of drunkenly bond over their wives. At this point, though, Micro comes up with the idea of turning the information on Rollins over to Madani, but Frank doesn't want that. Frank wants to kill Rollins because Rollins is the guy behind the murder of Frank's family. As this is happening, Russo has brought in a group of disgraced mercs and promising them a big payday and special travel to countries that don't extradite if they break up this weapons deal that Madani is the setup, basically. As this is happening, Frank gets a panicked phone call from Sarah as she found a caber knife in Zach's backpack. Frank basically goes there and he's trying to talk to Zach, and Zach's basically like, yeah, he pulls out the knife. He says, this is actually a pretty good idea. I mean, this is Marine's best friend. I trust this more than a firearm. And because you can see when you get in, because with a firearm you can hit, you can shoot, you can miss, you can this, but with this, and he gets up really close to Zach. He actually holds the knife to his throat and says, this you're up close so you know it will work. And Zach kind of freaks out, and finally he starts crying, and he says, look, in his business, like, I have no more friends because they all think my dad's a traitor. They can't trust me anymore. I'm angry. I want them to hurt too. And it's enough for them to kind of break through, and eventually it gets sort of talked down, and things start to turn out. It's at this point that Russo's team gets into a shootout with Homeland Security, and they're fighting. Russo eventually turns on his partners, kills one of them who gets shot. He starts trying to flee, and Agent Stein confronts him. Russo's wearing a mask. Stein rips off the mask, and revealing Russo, but Russo's got a hidden knife. He gets up and he stabs Stein and slits his throat. Madani finds Stein just as he's dying. He starts to try to say something, but he can't form words, and he basically dies right there. And the episode ends with Madani going to visit Russo, and Russo cleaning the blood off of Madani. So, unfortunately, again, these two episodes of The Punisher were just pretty dull. Again, like, the whole government conspiracy thing, it should be interesting, and it just isn't. Like, can't we just have Frank Castle go after the Mafia? I know I've said that before, and I'll try not to hammer home the point too much, but yeah, they're dull. I mean, there are some interesting points. Like I said, I guess now with Russo being full-blown evil, and Madani kind of wavering as to what's going on, being hipper to what's going on, it is kind of getting a bit more interesting. Hopefully things pick up, because this is... it's starting to get really boring, like I said. Okay, so the next video up, and yes, this is the third video I will be filming for today, is going to be the WrestleMania predictions card. After that, it will be the WrestleMania predictions show. Then after that, it will be the review for A Quiet Place, and then it will be the NXT TakeOver New Orleans review, and then it will be the WrestleMania recap and review, and that's not going to be up until Monday. So yeah, so both these parts should be up on give or take Thursday. Friday will be the WrestleMania predictions. Saturday will be A Quiet Place. Sunday will be NXT TakeOver. Monday will be WrestleMania. See you all then. Hey guys, is there a movie you want me to tackle? If it's some stinker like Baywatch or the Emoji Movie or something else? Check out my Patreon at Sleepy Time for Cat Productions. See how you can make that happen.